We got some guests, and we're gonna stab some stuff. Hey, we got some guests. You might recognize this guy, Greg, sword casting guy. He was on the channel How to Make Everything more than once, right? And he travels around doing workshops on how to cast swords like this.
And this.
And that one. You'll remember this one. I did this one recently. We're not going to do this because aluminum's boring. We're going to make it in silver. But before we do that, how about you tell people what you do a little bit?
Sure. I travel around the country teaching sword casting classes. It started out as a class for kids, and now I kind of teach it for everybody. So if somebody gets 12 or more people who are interested in casting a sword, I will come to them. If you're interested, contact me at swordcastingguy.com.
Cool. I'll put a link to that in the description. I've never cast silver before, so this might get real interesting. Hopefully it'll go well. A lot of you have told me that silver casts beautifully well, so fingers crossed. If not, we do have a backup plan. Here are the special guests. They attended one of Greg's classes, and they have with them a gigantic brick of fine silver. You guys want to say anything?
Greg's classes are awesome.
You'll learn some Bronze Age stuff, because they're Bronze Age swords mainly, right?
That's right. Bronze Age.
Yeah, swords and kopeshes and stuff. And remember, Bronze Age stuff is cast. So no one in the comments should be yelling, it's supposed to be forged. No, it's not. You can forge bronze, sure. But no, they were cast. Pointing and being angry, that's a good idea on the internet. So with this, I did something called a false cope method. A little bit of vocabulary. The wood boxes, they're called flasks. The top one is called a cope. The bottom one is called a drag. Remember that. So with this, I did a false cope method, where I basically take the cope, which is the top flask, ram it up, then I flip it over, shove the sword in. The sand's kind of soft, so you can do this. Then I put the drag on, the bottom one, ram that up, flip it back over, take the cope off, dump it out, put it back on, put the runners and all that junk on there, and ram it back up again. So this looks like a kitchen sieve. That's because it is.
Yeah.
But what I'm doing, basically, I'm pushing the sand through the sieve. This is very fine sand, but what this does is it gives me a facing coat that's a little bit better. So when it compresses, you don't have holes in it. So that kind of gives you a better surface finish. Like pretty much everything I do has two goals. It's to reduce turbulence of the metal, because that mixes air in and mixes oxides in, which makes the castings weaker. And also I try to improve surface finish because I hate sanding. Sounds really complicated, and it is, but that's because previously we've been ramming the drag up, which is the bottom flask, shoving the sword in, and that's it. And the problem is, when you shove the sword into the sand, that side that you shoved the sword into, the surface finish isn't as good. So the false cope method, you dump out the one that you shoved the sword into, or your pattern or whatever it is, and re-ram it up so you still have the nice surface finish. And that's also why this takes 5 times longer to set up. You do this when you don't have a split pattern. A split pattern is basically when the pattern is split at the parting line, if you couldn't figure that out from the name, and they're rammed up separately. You don't have to shove nothing in the sand. That's how my sand rammer was rammed up, if you remember that video from a while back. That is a split pattern, no false cope needed. I did a lot of this ahead of time because I didn't want to waste all this time just ramming boxes and dumping them out when people were standing there, because, you know, they got stuff to do too. Don't want to be using up all their time. It's a little more complicated, so I pour metal into this, into the soup can, fill it up to the top, keep it full to the top. And it's full because I don't want any air getting to the hole, which is at the bottom of this. So when I keep it full, any air that gets sucked in from pouring will float to the surface before the metal has a chance to go down the hole. So, and it being elevated serves two purposes. One is head pressure, so all the weight of all this metal pushing down kind of forces it in, because I'm not doing it centrifugally, I'm just using gravity. And it also, being up high, I don't have to dump the metal in from above, which would suck air in. I just put the top of the crucible here and tip it. So less turbulence that way. The metal goes down here, turns, and goes into a spin trap here, where it kind of fills up and then it freezes and stops. But off of that little journey, there's a 90-degree bend. Once it's kind of full in there, it'll start trickling into the sword, and it'll trickle up this way, because this side is going to be slightly elevated, just because the driveway is not flat. But I do that on purpose with this side up, so that the metal won't run down. It'll slowly fill from bottom, from tip to handle. And I do tip to handle instead of the other way around, because the metal will be hot flowing through the tip. it won't cool off. You know, if it were the other way, the handle would fill up fine, and by the time that front of the metal reaches the tip, it'll be too cold to fill into the tiny point. This is the very end. It's a vent and it's also a feeder. So the metal will get here and then it'll fill this up. So this will freeze, this and this will freeze last, but they also let air out as the metal is going. So dual purpose, feeder vent. Now to remove everything, you kind of tap it up a bit to unstick it. What does not help is how caffeinated I am right now. So I've just been pounding coffee all day and I get the transitions a little bit good. I'm just packing it down because I don't want grains of sand to fall back in.
Because there were people around, I was trying to keep everyone kind of safe and enjoying their time, so I didn't film too much of the furnace melting. Silver is probably the coolest looking metal I've ever seen when it melts. The ingot starts turning kind of liquidy, starts going a bit glassy, and then just kind of starts pooling at the bottom. When it's molten, it is super clean looking. It looks almost like, basically like water. It's so fluid, so pretty. I wanted to touch it, but I also didn't because it was glowing hot. I had a camera person. Someone was holding the camera. Isn't that cool? Usually don't get that. You can see when I'm pouring, I keep the pouring basin full to the tippy top. I don't want any air getting sucked down there. Just a little tip. Oh, and for the record, if you watch my hands, you can see the glove sizzling. There's a lot of radiant heat from molten metal. Don't let it fool you. Might look like shiny water, but it will melt your face off. All of it. Every last drop, beat it up and ran right out of the crucible like water out of a glass that's covered in car wax or something. I really don't have anything to compare it to, but man, that cast nice.
I need more silver. Wow, that is great.
Really cool.
I sure hope.
I'll just set it here.
So removing this from the sand, I have to be super careful. This is very, very soft. I pulled a little bit too hard and put a huge bend in it. That was not pleasant, but because it's so soft, I just bent it back, hoped nobody noticed, and carried on. I tried cutting off the risers with as little of a kerf as possible. So this is the sprue, the surge trap, copper tube I put on the top for a chill to make sure it didn't pour out. Still got a little out, but it did its job. I wanted to waste as little silver as possible. I took the same approach when I was trying to clean it up. Yes, angle grinder, not jewelry rated, but hey, it's what I got. I'm not a jeweler. And we quickly decided I am not being aggressive enough because I'm too much of a sissy. I didn't want to waste any silver. So Greg took over because he actually does this a lot. And he got to work grinding and grinding. He's dunking the sword in the jar there because he wants to kind of keep it quenched. He doesn't want the thing getting so hot because, you know, burns are bad on your skin. But he was able to get it looking real nice. I really only see one major casting defect. I'm pretty sure a jeweler can fill that. As a result of all this grinding, however, Greg got pretty fancy looking.
Yeah, you have the most valuable arm decoration ever. It's glitter the manly way.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Good experience?
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing.
Happy with your sword?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is beautiful.
Sweet.
You guys did an
Yes.
amazing
Then I'm
job.
happy.
That is incredible.
I'm happy if you're
Look
happy.
at the sheen on that.
Yeah, and that's just angle grindered. If you take it to like a jeweler to polish it, it'll
Right.
be even more shinier.
Tina's
I
can
actually
take it.
have a polisher I brought over.
You have a polisher?
Oh yeah.
What gives? Where is it?
Very pointy.
In my basement hiding.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't have any polishing stuff, so I'm gonna leave that to someone else. So cool.
And I left it to him to do the wrapped handle. He does leather wrapped handles. He whipped out his bucket of leather strips, some spray adhesive, and wrapped it nice and carefully, and it ended up looking really cool in my opinion. I've never leather wrapped a handle, although I did buy a bunch of leather working tools. I'm just, you know, it's on my list. I'm busy. Give me a break.
Black. Who has an eye for color? You do, Rachel.
Do you have cow print? Zebra print. No, don't listen to me. I have terrible ideas.
Right.
See all the people on Discord? This is why I got into leatherworking, and then being too busy is why I never did it again. I was into it just long enough to get someone else really hooked on it, and then I stopped.
So we basically left it to them to find someone who knew what they were doing to polish it shiny. And I think a jeweler is able to fill in that little casting defect if you can see it, if it shows up. They can use like a little torch and like, you know, melt a little bit of silver filler, kind of like maybe like a TIG welder, except you can't TIG weld silver. TIG welders use electrical resistance to generate heat, and silver, pure silver, has so little electrical resistance, you just can't do it.
There it is.
There we go.
There is your sword.
There is your sword.
Yes.
That is awesome.
Possibly the coolest thing I've done. Pure silver sword. Sorry, Smithsonian and your Project Egress. There's no silver and there's no weaponry either.